Is Broadcom at $222 a 3x opportunity? That's what I'm going to cover in this video. I'm going to do it in two parts. In part 1, I'm going to cover the growth story, and in part 2, I'm going to cover the valuation. Let's get started with part 2. I'm assuming that you have watched part 1, which is going to talk about the growth story. Now in part 2, I'm going to strictly stick to the valuation. Before I continue, I want to clarify that this is not financial advice. I'm not qualified to give financial advice. I'm simply recording my thoughts about Broadcom. At the time of recording, I do not own Broadcom shares. I'm going to show you two cases. One is a best case scenario and the other one is a base case scenario. I believe in the base case scenario, but the best case scenario is for reference. Let me show you the best case scenario on the screen. Whenever I see two different business segments that are growing at different paces, have different margins, I will value them separately. And people do a mistake of value a company on a whole, even though it has different revenue segments. That works sometimes, but I'm not a fan of that. So I'm going to divide Broadcom into two pieces, AI and non-AI. So in the AI opportunity 2027, I'm only going to do valuation for 3 years out because that's how we have the guidance provided to us, and we do not know what's going to happen after that. So in 2027, I'm estimating that they will capture 70% of the upper limit of what CEO Hocktan said. That's $90 billion. So in 2027, the AI opportunity is $65 billion of revenue. And the assumed net profit margin is 50%. So Nvidia makes an operating margin of more than 60% and their net profit margin is 50%. I've already discussed about the operating margin challenges, but I'm assuming 50% Nvidia-like margin, which I think is pretty much impossible. With that, they can make close to $32 billion of net income in 2027. I'm assigning an Nvidia-like multiple. Currently, Nvidia trades at about 53 PE, so I'm assigning the same here. And with that, the market cap for Broadcom's AI division would be $1.6 trillion in 2027. The number of outstanding shares at the moment are 4.67 billion. Yes, Broadcom is going to make a lot of net income by 2027, but most of it will go towards debt payment. They have close to $70 billion of debt, so they have to pay that back as a priority because the interest payment of the debt will come onto the net income and that's going to affect the EPS. So in my opinion, that's the priority. So therefore, I'm not assuming any buybacks. So with that, the AI stock price for 2027 is $345. In the non-AI part, in 2024, they're making $39 billion in the non-AI part, 12 billion in the AI part, right? So in total, they made 51 billion, so 39 billion will be from the non-AI. It's growing in the single digits, so I'm going to assume 5%. And the operating margin for this is 30%, but I'm also assigning a net profit margin of 30% because this is a best case scenario. And I'm assigning a multiple of 25, with which this company's market cap for non-AI would be $373 billion. And when I divide the $373 billion of market cap with 4.67 billion outstanding shares, I get a stock price of $80 for Broadcom's non-AI division. When I add them both, I get a stock price of $425 in 2025. And that's 92% gain from the current price of $222. So this, in my opinion, is the best case scenario. I have assumed the higher limit of Hocktan's guidance, and I assumed Nvidia like margins and Nvidia like multiple. So therefore, this is the best case scenario. Let me move on to the base case scenario, which I believe in. In this, I'm going to take the midpoint of Hocktan's guidance, which is 75 billion, and 70% of 75 billion is 52 billion. And I'm assigning operating margin of 50% because the CEO said the operating margin would be higher than where they are before. And their operating margin in 2024, late 2024, is 30%. So I'm assuming 50% operating margin here. I'm not going to assign 60% operating margin like Nvidia because the CEO is not committing to it. He said, yeah, it's going to be higher than where we are today, but he did not give that guidance, right? So I'm also assuming 40% net margin. I think that's also not very possible because they have interest payments and tax. But again, I'm still thinking that it's still reasonable. With that, they will have $20 billion of net income in 2027. I'm still assigning a 50 multiple because a lot of people do not understand the margin structure. They would just say, yeah, this is an AI company that's making XPUs and it's growing phenomenally. Yeah, I understand that. So I'm assuming NVIDIA like multiple even in the base case. And with that, I'm getting a AI division stock price of $222. And for the non-AI, I'm keeping the same. So that's $80. So when I put these two things together, I'm getting stock price of $302 in 2027. And from the current price of $222, that's a gain of 36%. So in my best case scenario, I'm getting a stock price of $425, which is almost a 2x. And in my base case scenario, I'm only getting a 36% gain. So for my personal journey, I go with the base case where I'm only seeing 36% gain in 3 years. That's still good. That's almost 12% on an average, which beats the index. And there's also hype associated with this investment. But for me, I don't think I will buy the stock. I will probably buy some options for off and for like probably like $270, $280 strike if it's available. But otherwise, based on my valuation, I'm not seeing too much upside. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks so much for watching.